Imagine the splendor of a royal palace. Glittering chandeliers, embroidered gowns, golden halls echoing with music. But behind the shimmering facade, there was another truth. A truth so foul, so revolting, that it has been carefully brushed out of the portraits and tapestries. This is the story of Europe's royal courts, where kings dined in filth, queens walked among stench, and servants waded through rivers of waste. Tonight, we descend into the secret history of palaces, where naked cooks stirred pots, rats ran freely, and even the most powerful monarchs could not escape the stink of their own households. In the summer of 1535, King Henry VIII mounted his horse and began a royal progress that would last for months. Behind him trailed more than 700 courtiers, servants, guards, and attendants, a living tide of humanity that swept through palaces, abbeys, and noble estates across England. To the people, it looked like a spectacle of power, a moving theater of royal magnificence. But beneath the ceremony lay a darker reason. Henry and his court weren't moving out of luxury. They were running from their own filth. Within days of settling at Hampton Court or any other palace, the stench would rise. Rotten food thrown carelessly into corners, chamber pots overflowing, rats fattened on scraps, dogs and horses leaving their marks in the courtyards. Human waste piled up in underground chambers until it reached head height. The walls turned black with soot from endless fires, and the very air grew heavy with the stink of unwashed bodies. A royal palace, the shining heart of empire, could become more foul than the humblest peasant hut. That is why Henry VIII's household never stopped moving. 30 palaces, 60 residences, thousands of miles on the road. Each stop allowed the land to recover from the swarm of mouths that devoured its stores. And each abandoned palace could finally be scrubbed and scoured by the king's gong scourers, men tasked with cleaning the mountains of excrement left behind. To live like a king, in truth, was to flee the consequences of one's own court. Step inside a royal kitchen in the 16th century, and the first thing you would notice is not the aroma of roasted meats or spiced pies. No, it was the heat, the smoke, and the stench. Naked cooks sweated by the fires, their bare skins slick with grease, their rags soaked with wine and broth. Some collapsed by the hearth, sleeping on the floors where dogs prowled and rats darted between piles of bones. Henry VIII, disgusted by the filth, had to issue decrees. No cook was to work naked, no servant was to lie by the fireside in rags. But his words carried little weight against the tide of grime. In a world without soap, without plumbing, without understanding of germs, filth was inescapable. Servants were encouraged to pee into great vats, for urine was collected and used to wash clothes and scrub floors. Imagine it? The king's garments, embroidered with gold, rinsed in the stinging stench of human urine. When the palace grew unbearable, the floors were strewn with herbs and flowers to mask the rot. Courtiers carried pomanders, little balls of perfume pressed to their noses, desperate to block out the odor of waste and sweat. The kitchens themselves reeked of slaughter. Animals were butchered on the same tables where food was served. Blood pooled, mingling with ashes and grease, while maggots wriggled in forgotten corners. To eat at a royal banquet was to taste magnificence. In a hall where filth lay just beyond the golden tablecloth. This was the contradiction of power. Dazzling grandeur on the surface, decay and rot beneath. When Louis XIV, the Sun King, moved his court permanently to Versailles in 1682, it was meant to be the pinnacle of royal magnificence. Gilded halls, mirrors reflecting candlelight, gardens stretched like paradise. Yet behind the polished marble, Versailles was one of the filthiest places in Europe. Over 10,000 nobles, officials, servants, and guards crowded into its chambers. Women lifted their skirts and relieved themselves in stairwells. Men urinated off balconies, even inside the royal chapel. Latrines leaked into bedrooms, their waste seeping through the floors. Pipes of iron and lead corroded, poisoning kitchens with foul backflow. Even the rooms of royal children stank of sewage. Marie Antoinette herself once walked through a courtyard and was struck by human waste hurled from a window above. This was Versailles, a palace of power soaked in rot. Perfume became not a luxury, but survival. Nobles drenched themselves in scents to cover the stench of never-washed garments. Floors were sprinkled with herbs, but the stink always returned. Beneath chandeliers in silk, lice crawled in wigs, fleas infested beds, and rats gnawed in the shadows. Yet Versailles dazzled the world. Foreign ambassadors saw only glitter, not grime. To admit the filth would be to admit the truth, that even the Sun King's palace was built on a mountain of excrement. If filth reigned in the palaces, it was not only because of waste and vermin. It was also because Europe itself had turned against water. By the 16th and 17th centuries, the belief spread that bathing was dangerous. Doctors warned that warm water opened the pores, letting in deadly diseases. And so the greatest monarchs of Europe, kings and queens draped in silk and jewels, refused to bathe. Queen Isabella of Castile is said to have bathed only twice in her life, once at birth and once before her wedding. King Louis XIV, the Sun King, is rumored to have bathed only twice as well. Marie Antoinette bathed once a month. King James I of England never bathed at all, his chambers crawling with lice. Instead of water, they covered themselves in perfume. Clothes were never washed, only layered with powder and scent. Parasites thrived. Rooms stank of sweat, waste, and rotting fabrics. To walk into a court chamber was to be blinded by jewels and gagged by the odor. This superstition against bathing condemned Europe's courts to centuries of filth. What paintings show as golden splendor was, in truth, a theater of stench. Kings and queens were not just rulers of nations. They were prisoners of their own decay. So the next time you gaze at portraits of dazzling monarchs, Henry VIII in his furs, Louis XIV in golden robes, or Marie Antoinette in her silks, remember this: behind the glitter lay filth, behind the perfume rot, behind the crown lice and stench. Royal palaces were not just theaters of power. They were prisons of decay, where kings and queens tried to outrun their own dirt, but never could. This is the hidden history of Europe's glittering courts, a world of naked cooks, overflowing waste, and monarchs drenched not in water, but in fear of it. Thank you for joining me on this dark journey into the past. If you want more forgotten, shocking truths of history, subscribe, like, and stay with us. Because here, history is never clean.